Hello and welcome to Crystal Confab. We are, of course, here for another week talking about something that jumps into the crystal realm without technically being a crystal. I am, of course, joined by Ashley, Nicholas, and Adam, and we're going to talk about Libyan Desert Glass, also known as Libyan Gold Tektite. Are you all as excited as I am to talk about this rather interesting one?
I definitely am. I love this stone so much. I was first introduced to it years and years ago. And we were just talking a little bit before we started recording. There's sort of this like Moldavite to Libyan desert tektite pipeline that many of us follow to sort of find this stone. And I remember just being so taken with it.
I know I have so many people come to me and go, "Oh, what do you think of Moldavite?" And I'm like, "There's Moldavite." And of course, Moldavite got, its kind of time of glory a few years ago, and I think it was being shared a lot on social media and TikTok and so on, and its price skyrocketed. But I'm like, you don't want Moldavite. You want Libyan Desert Glass. And in my opinion, and maybe that's why we're doing the episode before a Moldavite episode, I think it's actually better than Moldavite. But there's amazing other tektites as well that I love that are found all around the world.
Absolutely. This is one of the, I think, underappreciated gems that we really should work with a little bit more. And I think of all of us, it is always appropriate for Nicholas to dive into the amazing history and information that we have about Libyan Desert Glass.
Thank you. This is a special piece to me. I'm wearing my favorite one, which Ashley, of course, will recognize that I bought and treated myself to. I saw this on a store shelf in Glastonbury a couple years back, and I had to do a double take because I really thought this pendant was on the wrong shelf. It's just too perfect. And I thought I was looking at some really flawless citrine with an emerald set in the bezel. And on close inspection, I could see these little wispy waves running through it, which tell us that it has an amorphous silica structure, which we call Le Chatelierite. And it is like the juiciest piece of Libyan desert glass I've ever seen in my life. But I do have a few pieces. I've been fascinated by this rock for a really long time. And um, we have evidence that may stretch as far back as 30,000 years of human history with this stone. And there are some mysteries about it that remain unsolved. We don't have like a really rich record of use. We don't have like an overwhelming amount of materials that have been made from it. We've got some lithic points, things like, spear points, arrowheads, knives, that kind of thing. Um, and obviously the most famous thing that I think all of us here have seen is the pectoral of King Tut. So King Tutankhamun was buried with a really resplendent piece of Libyan desert glass carved into the shape of a scarab and set literally over his heart, which is pretty significant in Egyptian history and culture. I'm not the expert in that though, but what I would really love to talk about is our evolution of the understanding of what makes this particular rock. So we often see in literature that it was discovered in the 1930s. We know, of course, now that it was discovered 30,000 years before then, but we'll let some white people take credit, I guess, because they do anyway. And the initial theories about the formation of this material were kind of at odds with one another. Other impact glasses had been found, but weren't very well understood, and the processes behind them were and continue to be debated to this day. But because of the extraordinary clarity and the brightness of color that we see in Libyan desert glass, um, there's been a lot of controversy in trying to figure out where it comes from. The first two theories were, well, this might be a kind of fulgurite, the Great Sand Sea. Where it comes from is mostly pure quartz. So it stands to reason that if we get some kind of uh, lightning activity, we're going to get pretty clear fulgurites from it, except none of them are in the right shapes to be fulgurites. This forms large blocks, quite large blocks by natural glass standards, outside of the realm of obsidian, at least. Another theory that was popular in this era was that it was created by volcanic activity on the moon. and eventually reached its way to us, probably with the help of, something, we'll say impactful in more ways than one, with regards to the moon. But we've like discredited that theory time and time again. And there, in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, there have been a couple theories that have gone back and forth on who is the most likely. And the challenge here is that we can very safely say, albeit we also would very pedantically say, that this is not a tektite, because there's a specific definition in that term. But exactly what it is still slightly open to debate. But I think the most recent papers are really indicative of getting close to an answer. So for a long time, I favored a theory of what we call radiative melt. So this is like an airburst. A meteor is coming through the sky, it explodes in the atmosphere, it sends huge shock waves, rippling around. And we have evidence of this kind of thing producing glasses, both from meteoric activity as well as like trinitite, the glass that was created from the Trinity testing site with atomic bombs. And it seems very plausible. And at a surface level kind of analysis, this makes a lot more sense for the sheer volume of this material that has been uncovered. The other main theory that's been out there, of course, is that, like other impact processes, it's from a meteorite striking the Earth. The challenge with this is that no crater has ever been found, no definitive locus for the impact site, therefore creating a predictable stone field has really been located. And around about 2013, an unusual black rock was analyzed, and the composition of it is congruent with fragments of comet cores. So rather than our standard kind of meteorite, it is possible that we have a comet responsible for one of these two events, either the explosion in the atmosphere with radiated melt or an actual impact. And the challenge is that when we start to look at the ingredients inside the glass, not just the glass itself, which behaves like most glasses, it has quite a few anomalies, but we start to look at the actual crystalline components in there, because we started by saying it's not a true crystal, but it actually contains a number of naturally occurring minerals. The most obvious that we can find, my little piece here has them, but they're probably not going to show up on camera. They're little like puffballs of cristobalite, which is a high temperature polymorph of quartz. It could definitely form under this condition where we have something explode in the atmosphere. The challenge is it can't get hot enough by that event alone to create some of the other things that are in there. This is considered to be one of the hottest events to have created geologic material on the Earth, in excess of, I think, something like 1,300 degrees Celsius. And that tells us something pretty remarkable. Now, one of the byproducts of this is a kind of polymorph of zirconium oxide. And we often just refer to it as zirconia, and it forms with a cubic crystal system. When we make it in a lab, it's a diamond simulant, but it does actually occur in nature. There is natural cubic zirconia out there. It is appreciably rare. And that could happen by either of these processes. But more important, in some recent microscopy, really, really detailed analyses, they found some anomalies with little bits of zircon in there. So zircon is a silicate of zirconium, a distant relative, chemically speaking and process speaking, of our cubic zirconia. And when you look at the structure of this, it is apparent that it didn't start out as zircon. It wasn't just all the ingredients, zirconium, silicon, and oxygen coming together to form one crystal structure. Instead, it's almost like a patchwork quilt, or maybe like a better example would be like a Rubik's Cube. And when you look at how the pieces fit together, it's apparent that they weren't shaped like this, and that it was actually a very unstable polymorph called reedite, which has only ever been found on the Earth in one kind of event, and that's meteoric impact. It is the only thing that gives us both the heat and the pressure required to create this unstable polymorph. Now, when the temperature gets hot enough, it doesn't stick around, but zircon is a heck of a lot more stable. So they've actually been able to analyze this and figure out that It is created by meteoric impact. However, that still doesn't make it a tektite. And here's where we get to split some hairs. When we look at these kind of impact processes, which includes the event and the stuff made by it, it isn't a tektite until it is thrown away from the impact site. And so we've got things like our Indochinites and Thailandites and Vietnamites, which are definitely impactites. We have Moldavite, definitely are tektites, and Moldavite definitely a tektite as well. But then we get things which we call like Muannong style glasses that are often layered. They show evidence of flow. They're usually in pretty large blocks, too heavy to fly very far from the crater. And then we get stuff like our Darwin glasses as well from Tasmania that are right there at the site of impact. And therefore they can potentially be quite large. And there are pieces of Libyan desert glass that weigh tens of kilos. They're massive. They're phenomenal. They're appreciably more rare now than they used to be. And this tells us also that it can't have traveled very far. What I found really exciting in researching for this is that a sizable distance away from this main locus of the Libyan desert glass a few years ago, they discovered at another site, another deposit of it. They're smaller, which should make sense for traveling a little bit farther. But the most unusual bit to me is that they are pink instead of the normal yellow, gold, or green. I don't know how pink. I only have black and white images, unfortunately, in academic papers, but I would love to just find a teeny piece of pink Libyan desert glass from Wad Al Kubi. So hopefully one day there's enough that they can put it on the market. So far, there is not. But what we start to notice from all of this investigating is that I find that there is kind of this centering quality. It's like we keep, we'll say, circumambulating the perimeter instead of making it into the core of the mystery. And for me, this is very much like the symbolism of the sun and all the things that orbit it. Sometimes a little bit of mystery is what holds things together. We get the heart scarab, the scarab itself, also a very solar symbol in medical astrology. The heart is ruled by the sun, and it establishes this relationship with the center and the periphery, the middle bits of us and all the things in between that help it communicate. And there is a kind of centering quality in this stone that whether or not we know how it's formed, we keep orbiting it. We keep being drawn into this. We have this kind of fun, investigative journey that we go on, but none of that really matters when we fall in love with it. There's something so immensely magnetic about this stone that keeps things in motion. It allows us to cultivate enough stillness that there's room for the rest to just fall into place. And I love that this material is such incredibly pure silica, and such incredibly anomalous silica as well. It's one of the driest rocks on the face of the earth. There's almost no moisture anywhere in it at all, which is true of most impact glasses and tektite glasses, but this one like takes the cake. It's also one of the oldest. So we've got this incredible event started by a rock that traveled this immense distance, that made contact with us, that brought this very solar, luminous stone to the earth. And it was as if some kind of cataclysmic inspiration happened that laid these seeds that we're still working through together, whether that's in the mineralogical sense or the metaphysical sense. And I love that we still don't quite have it figured out. We are getting reasonably certain, I think. But I look forward to the mystery unfolding a little bit as we go on each year.
Nicholas, thank you so much for that. And I really wanted to kind of clarify with the term. So one thing I've kind of discovered today, so it's not a tektite, but would it be classified in as an impactite or not?
So it's definitely an impactite. So our difference eventually essentially boils down to how far things travel. So when we get that cosmic impact into silica-rich sediment, we can have very proximal impactites, which don't travel very far at all. So the big blocks of this that historically have been found in Northern Africa are going to be examples of this. The ones that have traveled a little bit farther away and show, and you can see in some of the polished material evidence of layers, strata of, the darker browns, the richer greens, and then that kind of straw kind of gold background color. These are going to be similar to our Muan Nong style impact glasses that you find in Vietnam and elsewhere. They often have evidence of only partially melted materials in them, which is what creates that kind of flow patterns in them, still considered impact glasses. The next kind of branch that we see forming are our proximal splash form tektites. So these are things that are, in like the dumbbell shapes and kind of the teardrop shapes. From there, we get into our medial and our distal ones. That's going to take us to like the australites, which are flanged. They have that kind of button shape. They are probably the only ones that made it into the farthest reaches of the atmosphere. When we look at the pressure of the air bubbles inside these things, it can give us clues as to, the distance away from the Earth, the elevation at which they were formed, and by and large, tektites all form in our atmosphere. They don't get very far away. The tektites that account for the greatest number um, also happen to be the smallest. They're what we call microtektites, and they are often very hard to see with the naked eye, similar to the size of a grain of sand. There are more of these by number than anywhere else, but less by volume because they're so tiny. And these travel immense distances. And many of these, because they're so small, we get a really clear, idea of their true color. Because we don't have to cut them into thin sections and hold them up to the light. And a lot of them end up being very similar colors to Moldavite, even the ones that are found off the Ivory Coast and in the Caribbean. So yeah, it's definitely a case of splitting hairs. But to label this a tektite would be incorrect for several reasons, especially if it didn't form by an impact at all. We're not entirely sure. We're just mostly sure that it was an impact, but if it was formed by radiative melt, even calling it an impact glass is a challenge if there wasn't an impact. So, but I think we can safely say this is an impact glass because we have a piece of the shatter cone, a piece of the comet that may have been the cause, and we can kind of map out the Strone field being so close to that event.
So if we're looking at all the impactites and all the tektites that have been found around the world, do you have a bit of a rough idea? And this is a random question, but are we likely to get a new one in our lifetime, or do they happen so far apart from each other time-wise that we'll have to wait around another 10,000 years probably till we get our next tektite or impactite hitting the Earth and being significant?
The challenge is it's not so much that they have to happen at regular intervals. It's just big enough space debris has to hit us at the right angle. It has to be big enough not to burn up in atmosphere, which of course we hope it is small enough not to hit us, or that it will miss us if it is significant. But there are some things hanging out there that are on trajectories that are, only a little bit likely to ever hit us. It's possible, but it would take something kind of unusual happening. Thankfully, we've got astronomers out there looking at all this stuff and trying to come up with solutions if something major were going to happen. It would impact life on Earth as we know it to generate material to the volume that something like Libyan Desert Glass was created by.
And isn't there also, like, I don't know if you can confirm this, Nicholas, there's only been something like 19 impacts that have been witnessed by humans in like recent history, or at least in more modern history. There's only been like a few recorded ones around the world, and it's like not even 20.
I don't have the fact checking on this. I could like draw a map of some Strone fields of tektites for you, but I'm not a I've never done the deep dive into meteorites to know exactly what has hit us most recently. But the truth is that most of the stuff coming from space we never see because it's too tiny. The things that we can see usually burn up, and that's what creates our shooting stars. And even fewer things are worth investigating. And if you work in the geoscience field for long enough, and sometimes if you just work in the crystal shop for long enough, you get those phone calls. Hey, I think I found a meteorite. And they never do. Um, uh, in the earth science world where I work, one of our colleagues at another institution has worked in like geochemistry and aerospace geology for his whole life. He's had more than 600 people inquire about specimens they found. And out of those 600, do you know how many actual meteorites there were? One. There was actually one. I thought the number was going to be zero as well, but no. Jan says there was one, and it was not taken under. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Let's just say that it wasn't acquired through the right channels, and it was also not geologically significant. So either like dump it back in the earth or keep it in a box and don't tell people about it. I have yet to have someone come to me with an actual meteorite either, but maybe one day.
I don't know if the laws are the same in America as they are in Australia, but I believe if you do actually discover a meteorite in Australia as a whole, you have to hand it over. That's right, isn't it, Kyle?
WA, that's Western Australia exclusively. It's not even the rest of the country.
Oh,
It's,
so we just kick it over the border then.
it's like a really old Western Australian law. It's so bizarre, so bizarre. It all has to go through the museum.
Yeah. But I saw the Americans, were you nodding Americans that if you find one, it's not yours?
There are similar laws all over the world. Not every place does it the same way. Sometimes you just have to get a consult. You have to have people sign off. It depends on where it falls in a lot of cases. Here in the States, we have a lot of like more localized laws rather than national laws around some things. So it always check with your local jurisdiction. If you really think you found a meteorite or an impact process, it can't hurt to reach out to your local Earth Science Museum, but just be prepared to be disappointed.
And just be asking, I'm just asking for a friend. My friend's found a meteorite. What should I do? Yeah. So obviously there's going to be amazing powers metaphysically with Libyan Desert Glass. So I'm really excited to dive into that. Ashley, take us through. What do you find this to be really, really powerful for?
Yeah, so Nicholas, I'm so glad that you brought up Tutankhamun's scarab because we have that connection with the heart. And because this is an impactite, we have that connection with the cosmos, we have that connection with the stars. And it's like bringing that energy into the heart space, bringing that energy inside of us, reminding us that we literally are all made of stardust, that we all carry the universe within us, that we are not separate from it, we are of it. And that is one of, I think, the big lessons of this stone. But even more than that, if we think about the fact that this is a natural glass, right? And if we have that fusing together of those grains of sand, it's the coming together of all the disparate parts of ourselves. So it's this stone for great wholeness. It's also this deep reminder that we cannot exist and thrive on our own. We are communal beings. We thrive in community. We thrive with the support of others. And that we don't just find wholeness within ourselves, but we find wholeness when we embrace our role in community, when we embrace that big picture of how we can act with love, how we can be of service, how we can come together to do great things. And through this process of community, we ignite transformation, we ignite deep change. And I think it is so timely that we are doing this episode right now on the heels of some pretty big moving and shaking, not just here in the States, but globally for collective change, for deep communal support, for incredible transformation and hope and envisioning what can be possible when we get creative, when we work together, when we lead with the love. And I think this is such an amazing stone to sort of embody and encapsulate the energy of that right now, the spirit of that, the sentiment of that. So I think that this is a stone that we can turn to when we're feeling isolated. I think it's one that we can turn to remind us of the power of movements and the power of community and the power of action for positive change, and that we all carry within us this spark of transformation, this ability to ignite something bigger and be that sort of inspiration to the next person, right? It's like, um, this is such a weird analogy, but this is what came into my head. I like was not raised in the church or anything, but I went to Christmas Eve service a couple times, and I remember this thing with the lighting of the candles, and everyone passes on the candle flame to everyone else. It's kind of like that, like, receive that little bit of spark, but then pass it on, ignite that next person, inspire them into action. So you sort of continue to do that. And when we do that, we light up the whole world. And that is where really amazing things can happen. So I feel like that's the energy of this stone. And I kind of love that, all the way back to the time of ancient Egypt, we see that in Tutankhamun's pectoral plate. We see that scarab, that symbol of sort of eternal life, of reincarnation, of death and rebirth, because sometimes those old structures need to crumble and give way for that transformation to take place, for that new thing to be born. And so holding the energy of that transformation, that hope in our hearts, can inspire us to get through the hard times. So if you have a piece of jewelry with the Libyan Desert Glass, if you have even just a pocket stone you can have with you, especially in those times when things feel tumultuous, rocky, a bit unstable, where you need that reminder that sometimes those old things have to crumble and fall away before something new and even greater can be created. This is such a good companion to have right now.
So Ashley, you always have great tips on different ways to use it. Do you think this is just one that people need to have near them to have that energy embodying with their auric field, or is there any ways in particular you think this would be a really great one to work with and utilize its energy?
One of my favorite things, and it's funny that Nicholas said this is like one of the driest stones, technically. I love to create a solar water. It also has that deep connection with the sun. So many of us are familiar with like moon water. Well, guess what? You can create energy infused or charged waters with the sun as well. And because of that energy of hope, change, transformation, the sun so deeply embodies that quality and that sort of ability to ignite us into action. So just get a small glass or ceramic dish, put in some distilled water. You can use mineral water. Everyone has different opinions on this. I'll be honest, in a pinch, I'll just use tap water. It's fine for me. Put in your Libyan desert glass, let it charge in the sun all day. There's a lot of different feelings. Some people say when you do any kind of gem water essence, you want to let it go like a full 24 hours, something like that. But I think if you're specifically looking to capture the energy of the sun, I would put it out first thing in the morning when you get up, let it soak up the energy of that sunlight all day, and then I would actually remove it before it gets to dusk. And then you can bottle that, you can preserve it if you're going to keep it more than just a few days with some apple cider vinegar, some vodka, some brandy. That's a whole other episode, gem waters or elixirs, but I like to put this in a spray bottle, not use it as an elixir I'm taking internally, but rather spray it in my space. So Adam, I would love to know if there's maybe even like an essential oil you would recommend adding a couple drops of, just to create more of a vibrational spray. If you have the energy of the sun, of the Libyan desert glass, is there like a solar energy essential oil you could see adding to this?
Any of the citruses are very much solar influenced, so they would all be great. Lemon or bergamot would be some really great ones as well. There's a really interesting oil from New Zealand, in fact, that isn't so much a solar oil, but works really, really well with Libyan Desert Glass. It's known as Manuka. And most people know Manuka as a high premium honey that comes from the plant, but there's an amazing essential oil that comes from that as well. To go kind of on a bit of a tangent with Manuka, when white settlers got to New Zealand, they started to clear the land for agriculture because that's how they knew to obtain food. And the best way they'd do that is they just set fire to things. But there's this one stubborn plant that would keep growing back time and time again, and it would hold the soil together and stop erosion and so on. And that was Manuka. And this kind of teaches a little bit about the medicine of this oil from a metaphysical point of view. We all have, and this may be relevant to what's happening in the world right now, where we feel we're getting screwed over or we've been burnt. And what happens is that warring nature comes out, like how dare they, revenge kind of thing. Another classic example would be when someone gets a divorce. I'm going to take them for all they've got, and that type of thing. And Manuka is very, very soothing in its influence and just holds things together. And I think it's a really great one for helping to empower us, but not in this old way of kind of like violent empowerment or warring empowerment, but almost like contained empowerment, if that makes sense. So I think the citruses would be absolutely great. But if you are looking at that inner strength that we've been talking about and how do we navigate these tricky times when we all need to come together, but not let's fight back, but let's stand together as a resistance, Manuka might be a really interesting one for people to look at as well.
I kind of love that, like an oil for the resistance, an oil of determination, an oil of like springing back, even when things around you are, being literally burnt to the ground, finding that strength in your roots and anchoring in.
Yeah, and even birds in New Zealand will actually chew on the leaves and then they'll actually preen themselves to get rid of parasites. So as we would be spritzing and using that, it's also good for getting rid of, energetically things we want to get rid of as well. So it's a real empowerment and letting go of all the chaos and the parasitical things that drain our energy as well. So yeah, it could be a real fun combo to make. I've never made it before. I have to give it a shot. What about you, Kyle? I'd love to hear about how you found this to be really empowering for you.
Well, I would have to say Libyan Desert Glass is my top 5 easily. This is a pendant that I've had that I wear and I have been wearing for over a decade. I've got some of my favorite pieces here with me, big, juicy, yummy, yummy things. We've all touched on it. Everyone's already touched on it. Like for me, that idea of the solar energy, the sun energy, the outer space energy, all of these things have come together. But for me, it's about really being the best leader you can for your own life. That's what it's really taught me and helped me being. And this is something we've all touched on. When you're able to be a part of a community, when you're able to sort of be connected, you can also be a good person for yourself in your own life. And often it's by being a leader that you shine for others and they can figure it out. Instead of trying to fix everything and help everyone, you kind of do what you need to do for yourself. And I was shown the difference between the sun and the stars, right? Our sun is technically a star, but the stars are given this like mystique. They're twinkling, they're beautiful, they guide us through the darkness, they're here from afar. But the sun, oh, it's too harsh, it's too hot, it's too bright. It's like we can maybe not appreciate our own sun as much as we do the stars. It's like we cannot appreciate ourselves as much as we do all the things around us and the things that are far away. And for me, it's like, no, appreciate yourself. You're at the center of your own solar system. There are things that orbit you closely, your close family, your work. Then there are things that get further away, that are less influential, that are less important. And then you're a part of a galaxy that's a part of a universe that is expanding. So if you can give yourself that ability to see yourself as your own universe, or your own center of a rather large expanding universe, Libyan Desert Glass guides us in the same way. I think it gives us that ability of perspective shifts and transforming how we can be within our own will. We can go, okay, I know that all of that is influencing me, but I still have to shine. I still have to do this. I still have to go to work, pay my bills. I still have to conserve my energy. And so this is where I think it really helps us with boundaries and boundary setting, which is a big thing with the will center. It's about being able to utilize your energy correctly, not overextend, not do too much, do less and be more efficient with how you're using your energy, right? On our planet, the sun shines for half the day, and then for half the day it's gone, right? You are doing what you need to do, then you rest. You're just existing. You have your own cycles, you have your own way of being. And I think it's important that we are allowed to be our own sun. We are allowed to be our own center point. We can be too bright for others. We can be too hot for some. You're too close if I'm too bright for you. Put some sunglasses on. That's not my problem. I'm not going to dim my light for you. I'm not going to change who I am for you. I'm the center of my solar system and my universe. You are yours, and you're just orbiting me. And if you're orbiting me, obviously I'm very magnetic, which we've touched on as well. And there's something about shining that does bring magnetism. Sometimes it's like moths to a flame. Sometimes it's not necessarily a good thing, but it's not that we shouldn't shine. You should always shine because the sun gives us life. It's about finding that Goldilocks zone. It's about finding that balance and that perfect place to be. And I think Libyan Desert Glass, with all it's been through, with all of its age, with all of its complexity, with all of its time, I think it really shows us that we can be our own leader, we can be our own center of importance, and we can be a part of something that is bigger and grander and more complex than we need to know about, than we need to understand. We are just parts of that big piece of the puzzle, and if all you can see is what's around you, that's fine. Why are we constantly trying to go out there so far into space when there are so many problems here on Earth that need to be fixed and could be fixed? Right? Same with yourself. Instead of thinking about all those things outside of your periphery that you can't fix, that you can't do anything about, sit with your Libyan Desert Glass and bring your focus inwards. What can I do? What is within my realms of power? What is up to me and not up to others? Where do I need to conserve and where do I need to do more? Where can I actually take more action? Where could I be more proactive? And this is where, like, where I wear this, it sits either over my heart center or just a little bit lower. It'll always sit basically where that scarab sat on Tut. And I always find it emanates and spreads out and just allows me to get out of here and into here, get into your center and work from that center outwards.
I really love the way you framed this, and it like gave me an aha moment that ties another part of my life into this conversation. I am a really dedicated Reiki practitioner, teacher, researcher, and there's a phrase that is often attributed to the founder of the system. In Japanese, it's something to the effect of uchu warisoku warisoku uchu, which means I am the universe, or I exist in the universe and the universe exists in me. And it's that same like hermetic teaching, as above, so below, as within, so without. And I feel like you just gave me this beautiful light bulb moment that connects these two things. And I think it explains why I have this really visceral, like embodied connection to the stone, because that's what it's about. It's embodying the universe and recognizing that and claiming the sovereignty that comes from that. So thank you.
The goosebumps that I'm getting right now is honestly insane, literally all up my arms. It's I love it. It's so, so cool. And I think that's the energy of Libyan Desert Glass. It's profound. It's not little, like its color is subtle, that sort of insipid yellow isn't everyone's cup of tea, but when you sit with it, there's so, so much.
So I'd love to theorize with everyone for a moment. Why do you think that Moldavite in the general consciousness has got more attention than Libyan Desert Glass? There's a couple of people trying to speak at once, I think. Kyle.
It's the impact of rapidity and our obsession with instant gratification in today's day and age. For me, like, it's the coinciding of Moldavite doing things quickly. It's going to transform things quickly, and today's lifestyle is driven by instant gratification. But that's my opinion.
Okay, yeah. Nicholas, what do you reckon?
Oh, I'll take the much more mundane route, and it totally comes from the efforts of a single company to market it at an auspicious moment, publishing the world's first book dedicated solely to the metaphysical properties of a tektite, which had never been done before. It was groundbreaking. It was revolutionary. And the fact that so many seemingly synchronistic, fortuitous things happened around that, that it kind of etched its mark in the collective psyche of the modern metaphysical milieu ever since. Without the popularity of the efforts of such a small team of people, we wouldn't have access to other tektites. We wouldn't have, the kind of, we'll say, cultural obsession with high intensity or high vibe or high frequency stones, which comes with its own capitalist kind of baggage, right? We want bigger, better, faster, and we want it now. If we could get it yesterday, that'd be even better. And we want it for the best price available, but we want it to also be worth a lot of money because it should look expensive. So like all of these things kind of come together in how we culturally form meaning around Moldavite. Yes, there's a spiritual component. It's a kick-ass stone. I love it. I've worked with it since I don't know if I want to say that on camera, but it's been decades that I have worked with Moldavite. And I actually got my first piece of Libyan Desert Glass as a college student working in the museum I work in again now. Yeah, I'm having so many full circle moments lately. Honestly, we can attribute the rise in popularity to the efforts of two people, two very synchronistic efforts that have, I think, benefited a lot of people in a lot of ways, but really it's good marketing.
I think I also have to address something that Nicholas kind of started to touch on here. And I'm going to be more of a jerk about it because Nicholas is so eloquent and so kind. There is an elitist quality to Moldavite that when it started to take off, because it was just a little bit more pricey, it was a little bit more fancy. It was a status symbol for a lot of people to show like how big of a piece of Moldavite they could basically afford. But then they translated that dollar for dollar investment into how big of a piece of Moldavite I can work with without having my life rocked, like all these TikTok people are saying. So that must mean then I am so spiritual and I am so enlightened because I can work with this giant piece of Moldavite around my neck and be very unbothered, nails painting emoji, like the whole that kind of energy. So for me, agree with Nicholas. I love the stone. I think it has some great qualities. Do I think there are better options that I'm much more drawn to? Yes. Am I also that rebel that when something becomes trendy and fashionable, I'm going to hard reject it? Yeah, a little bit of that too.
Mm. When I think of the energies and how I normally parallel them is I find Moldavite to almost be Leo-esque in its assertion and in its power. It likes to be very showy. But for me, Libyan Desert Glass has got more of a Scorpio energy. And I believe both have the same amount of passion or dynamic energy within their signs. But whereas Leo wants to be the star of the show, Scorpio maybe wants to be the director of the show. And I find Libyan Desert Glass works really well with that. Now, I do want to apologize to everyone because anyone who's been watching the video version of this, they've probably been squinting their eyes trying to see all these little bits of Libyan Desert Glass that my co-hosts have been showing. Let's look at a real piece of Libyan Desert Glass. We've been talking about the center of the universe and the center of the sun. This is the center of my complete crystal collection. So I found this where I used to work at a wholesaler a few years ago. It was not cheap, and I actually had to pay it off over about 2.5 years until it actually got to come home with me. But I absolutely love this stone and have loved working with it. For me, why I think it's so poignant at this point in time, and especially if you hark back to what Ashley was saying about this time of power, there's a really kind of significant but yet insignificant astrological event happening this week as well. Now, you may have been listening to these episodes, and some weeks I talk about Venus or Mercury, and you're like, yeah, we get that. And then I occasionally talk about asteroids, and then I'm going on to these dwarf planets. And you're like, why is Adam going off on all these weird and wonderful tangents and just making up names, surely, type of thing? So let me put this all in context for you. So when we're talking about our core planets, those are the core parts of our identity that we all know and we all see every day, from our sun sign all the way through to our Pluto sign and so on. Asteroids, which are all floating around in our solar system, help us to get the more fine-tuned bits, and they kind of separate one Leo from another Leo, one Aries from another Aries, and so on by where these asteroids were placed when you were born. But what we started to discover since the year 2000, remember that we're all, getting excited about the year 2000 and the awakening of a new consciousness, was these potential new, what are classified as dwarf planets. They are also sometimes called trans-Neptunian objects, so they're things beyond Neptune that are floating around. And that's kind of Pluto is our best known one, but there are more and more kind of being discovered, and now astronomers are debating which ones qualify as dwarfs and which aren't. I'm not too fussed with exactly which ones make the cut in their definition or not. There are significant astronomical bodies out there that are in the far deeper realms or the further realms of our consciousness and our awareness. And as we evolve as humanity, tapping into these bring in new things. Now, one of these is known as Varuna, and each of the dwarf planets help us to tap into a new consciousness of awareness that probably has already been in discussion for a few decades. But Varuna is very much about power. Now, when we think about power, and even if we kind of go back through history and talk about power, it's normally about how do we dominate? How does one thing take control of another? Whereas Varuna is very much about how does one be empowered and how does one lead without force? Now, if we look through history, that's never been done, really. It's always been whoever's in power is the one who's killed all their opposition and been able to force their way in. And we still see that old mentality. But you can see now that there is this bubbling in our new consciousness of how can someone rule? How can someone be empowered? How can someone lead without having to annihilate any opposition in that way? And that's why I love Libyan Desert Glass for this time as Varuna comes out of retrograde. So these ideas may have been bubbling up in us. And, you know, politically at the moment, there's a lot of this kind of questioning of how does someone lead without being a bully or dominating or being nasty in that type of way? And these questions come up during the retrograde. And now it's time for us to start showing this even in our own personal lives, not just on a global scale. And I find Libyan Desert Glass is a really great one for helping us to feel empowered. And I often, you know, on my personal YouTube channel, I have this listed as the Stone of the Silent Warrior. And I think this is a really beautiful one for helping us to work out how can I be empowered in this way, but not do it in how can I be powerful without having to annihilate everyone else in that way? And I love what Kyle was talking about, the sun and the stars. And, you know, there are many, many suns in this whole great space that we exist in, but we're only one of those stars, which is known as our sun as well. So I love this stone. I think it's a really poignant time for us to be working with it personally, astrologically, and what's happening in the world at the moment. But I'd love to ask everyone, is there any other ways that you've worked with this? Or I loved Ashley's idea of the solar water type of thing. Have we got any other ways that you think people could try and work with this stone a little bit more?
I was also going to volunteer solar water, but someone beat me to it because great minds think alike. I love taking this stone out into sunlight. I'm fair-skinned. I don't do a lot of direct sun, but like early morning, hold it to your brow facing the sunrise and let that light fill you. I'm like reminded of the mythos that we have of like the monk Kukai meditating facing the direction of dawn, and Venus, the morning star, is said to land in his mouth and bring all of the wisdom of enlightenment with him. Like just to have that kind of, you know, phosphoric, that light bringing energy, um, would be such a lovely meditation.
Has
I love
anyone
that.
seen the trend of sunflowering on social media?
No.
It's kind of doing just that. You literally go outside, you find the sun, orient your face toward it, put your hands down by your sides in like plank position, and just sunflower yourself by facing the sun. Close your eyes, let it soak up.
In my world, we just call that basking. Like, and I will do that any chance I can. I'm definitely part lizard. And I also love this idea of what we're doing by meditating with it, taking time with it. But I'd like you to think about when you're working with it, what little actions am I doing now that will influence the future? Asking yourself this question when you're working with it. Think of the sunlight, how it comes to us fairly directly, and then think about starlight, how it takes light years to get to us, right? The things you do now have lasting impacts. So be conscious of what choices you're making.
I think one more thing I would like to share before we run out the clock on this episode is I've long done this practice where I create a really, I don't know if I would even call it a crystal grid. It doesn't follow any sacred geometry. In my head, I've always just called it a grid, but it's like a grid for the solar system. And so I have a crystal to represent each planet, and I just put them on a little drawing of the different orbital paths of each planet and then around a central sun. So you could use something like this to represent the sun. But I almost think there's something really cool we could do with what Kyle was saying and thinking about yourself as the center of your universe and using this Libyan desert glass to kind of represent yourself and that inner spark and that inner light and letting yourself shine. And then what else is in your orbit? What else is in your universe? And choose a stone to represent each of those things and place them around you. I think there could be something really powerful and sort of like painting a personal picture of your universe with crystals.
I love that. I love the idea of that. I'm going to get into sunflowering. I'm going to take on that thing. But, you know, from a real practical point of view, we know that a lot of people struggle with sleep. Our balance between our serotonin and our melatonin balances is really kind of screwed up for many, many people. And that one of the best things you can do is when you get up in the morning, get that sunshine on the eyeballs. So I think, you know, get your Libyan desert glass outside, go and sunflower first thing in the morning, and I think that would do absolute wonders for you in that way as well. Now, a couple of things for the evening that I like to go connecting more with that star-like kind of energy. Grab five, if you have them, five different types of tektites, impactites. So it could be a moldavite, it could be a Darwin glass, it could be a palisade or that type of thing. Go lay outside under the stars in what I call the pentagram position. So kind of arms out and feet out, head back, and pop one at each point type of thing. And that's a bit of I've encouraged lots of people to do it. Lots of people have had different experiences with that, but it's a real kind of, you know, you're working with galactic stones that have been gifted from the universe. It can be quite profound in that way. People that are interested in past lives and want kind of a bit of a really soulful maybe duet. Numite and Libyan Desert Glass was one I read. I can't remember where I read it decades ago now, but I like to pair these two together, and I find that Numite is obviously a very old mineral from this earth, combining it with something that was gifted from from the solar system or the universe. So I think combining these two wisdoms together can be a really nice, empowering energy as well. So I know I often get asked which crystals go well together. I'm going to say Numite and Libyan Desert Glass might be a duet that people might like to try as well. So hopefully the share price of Libyan Desert Glass has just gone up and Moldavite's just gone down because of our episode. Now, while share markets are tanking around the world, maybe we should all just go out and buy some Libyan Desert Glass. We don't want to keep you any minutes longer. Go do that. We'll be back next week when we dive into another crystal or gift from Mother Earth. When we talk about Moldavite, we'll get round to it one day. We'll see you next week so you can find out what we do then. Until then, take care and blessed be.